Hi there. Flares Wizard is an add-on for creating realistic lens flares in Blender. In this tutorial, I will guide you through using version 3.0 of the add-on. Let's dive in. To begin, installing the add-on is simple. Just navigate to the add-ons section in the preferences, click on the Install button, locate the zip file, and then click on Install Add-on. Don't forget to enable the add-on after installation. While you're here, consider creating a new folder for your custom presets. If you already have one, navigate to it to find the Presets and Previews folders. The add-on will automatically detect and display the number of your custom presets. Once installation is complete, you'll notice a new Lens Flares tab in the end panel. Click on the Load button to load the add-on's Python properties. Remember to enable auto-run Python scripts for the add-on to function correctly. First, make sure that you have at least one camera and one object in your scene. Then, to add a lens flare, use the plus button. The presets browser will appear. You can attach the lens flare to the active object or the objects within the active collection. You can always change this parameter later. The blank button adds an empty lens flare, meaning it doesn't contain any elements. Elements will be covered later. To delete a lens flare, use this button. Here are the available presets. You can filter them using the B button for built-in presets and the C button for custom presets. You can also filter them by name. In version 3, there are 50 presets to choose from. To add a preset, use the button below the thumbnail. It will be attached to the lamp, since it's the active object, and it will be visible from the active camera view. To replace a selected lens flare, hold the Control key while loading the preset. Without holding Control, a new lens flare will be added. This menu offers various options. The first three relate to visibility. You can duplicate the selected lens flare. And you can save it as a new preset. Just name it and press OK. The final option deletes all lens flares. Now let's explore the general settings. From here you can choose the type of target. Then you can select the target object from here. You can change the global color, the scale, and the intensity of the lens flare. The Detect Borders parameter causes the lens flare to fade when outside the camera view. If disabled, the flare remains visible outside the camera view. The Distance parameter controls the fade-out distance. Setting in 3D space to 1 changes the lens flare's scale based on the distance between the target and the active camera, creating a 3D effect. Use the parameter Corrective Scale to fine-tune the scale. And you can go beyond the range 0 to 1 for added impact. The target type can be a collection of objects. For example, I will move the lamp to a new collection named Lamps and select it from the drop-down. The lens flares will be generated for all objects in the collection, and each flare will be an instance. This introduces the Instances panel. Here you can control the number of instances and the maximum distance from the targets to the active camera. Setting either parameter to -1 renders all available instances. You can also randomize the instance's color, scale, and intensity. Another way to instance a lens flare is to set the target as an object and enable the parameter Use Geometry Data. In this case, every vertex in the cube will have a lens flare generated. And we will have some additional options in the Instances panel. We can use the geometry attribute to control some aspects of the lens flares. For example, if we add a vertex color attribute, by default it is named attribute. I will change it to color, then if we type the name in the color attribute, the lens flares will copy the color of the vertices. It's also possible to use a vertex group to control the intensity or scale of the lens flares. All you need to do is to type the name of the vertex group in the attribute field. The modifiers, including the geometry nodes, are considered when use geometry data is enabled. For example, this animation is created using geometry nodes, and the scale of the instances is stored as an attribute named scale. A tip: when dealing with numerous instances, opt for a simple lens flare to get better performance. Enabling use geometry data generates a flare for each instance, and we can use the attribute scale to control the scale of the lens flares. Blinking introduces a flickering effect to lens flares. You need just to enable the option. You can set the minimum parameter to a low value to make the effect more noticeable, or a high value to make it subtle. The speed parameter is used to control the speed of the flickering animation. You can use the parameter distortion to distort the noise pattern. And it's possible to change the random seed. If you disable the parameter randomize, all the instances will have the same animation, and when enabled, every instance will have a different random seed. To make the lens flares interact with the objects in the scene, all you have to do is to put the obstacles inside a collection. Enable the obstacles detection option, and then select the obstacles collection. Now the lens flares will disappear when obscured by an object inside the selected collection. To enhance the animation, you can set the steps to 8, for example. And now the lens flares will fade out nicely. You can set the steps to a higher value for a smoother transition, but keep in mind that it's computationally expensive, and 8 steps is more than enough in most cases, unless you have a slow motion shot. You can also control the fade-out distance, so that the fade-out starts when the obstacle is close to the target from the camera view. You can also increase the samples option for a more precise detection, but again, 8 samples is more than enough for most cases, unless you have a close-up shot. The elements serve as the foundational building blocks of any lens flare, comprising one or more elements. Similar to lens flares, adding an element is as easy as clicking the plus button, then choosing an element. Let's start with the image element. The element presents multiple parameters, grouped into 4 panels. The first is shader. By default, the elements inherit the global color. However, it's possible to assign unique colors to each element. You can control this using the use global color parameter. Intensity of the element can be adjusted with the intensity parameter. To change the texture of the image element, use this button. The add-on includes over 100 textures for you to choose from. Moving to the transform section, you can control the element's location, rotation, and scale. Position moves the element along a line passing through the camera center. 0 represents the target's position, 1 is the camera center, and 2 is a mirrored position. You can lock the X and Y locations. and you can control the rotation. Enabling Track the Target makes the element face the target. Lastly, you can control element scale. The proximity trigger panel allows you to dynamically adjust element intensity based on the target's distance from the camera's borders. For instance, if the second intensity is set to 0, intensity becomes 0 at the borders and 7 at the center. A color ramp controls the interpolation between the two intensities, with element intensity mapped to black and second intensity to white. Many elements offer special options. For the image element, the fading distance parameter creates an interesting fading effect, along with an option to feather the edges. The next element is glow, a procedural element, simulating a glowing light source. Parameters remain consistent with previous elements, with added control over light falloff and interpolation. Irises is a procedural element for creating polygonal shapes, complete with familiar parameters and specialized options. Next is shimmer, another procedural element for generating light rays. Adjust complexity and ray width in the special options. Setting animation speed above 0 produces shimmering animation. Randomizing ray length and using circular completion to alter the shape of the element are also possible. Ring, a procedural element, creates ring shapes with parameters akin to shimmer, but with additional options. Hoop is similar to ring, but adjusts its scale based on the target's location. Ghost resembles the image element but supports multiple instances. In the special options, adjust instance count and distance between them, with additional randomization choices. Note that this is the heaviest element, equivalent to adding multiple image elements. Streaks is a procedural element for light streaks. Controllable in terms of streak count and randomization options. Caustic is a procedural element for caustic shapes with special options controlling shape and thickness. Finally, lens dirt, an image-based element, simulates dirt on the camera lens. You can alter the image and control mask size in the special options. To address potential problems, we have introduced the Lens Flares Planes section, in the Extra Options panel. For instance, when dealing with close-up shots, the lens flare planes might intersect with or go behind objects. Now you can easily adjust the position of the planes along their local z-axis using the Global Offset option. Another issue that may arise when using depth of field is the presence of artifacts on the borders. If you don't want these artifacts to affect the flares, you can utilize the plane's margin option. This option essentially scales up the planes, mitigating the problem. The final option is relative offset, which represents the distance between the planes. While it is mainly included for debugging purposes and might not have numerous practical use cases, it is available if needed. You don't necessarily need a full 3D scene for the add-on to be useful, thanks to the background functionality. To add a background, use the button Add Background Plane. Then you have the option to hide the plane in the viewport or in render. You can also offset the plane relative to the camera, and you can control the opacity. Use the Set Scene Resolution operator to match the scene's resolution to the background image, and you can change the background image. Then make sure that the view transform is set to standard to get the correct colors. Then you can add the lens flares to a still image or a video. When you have multiple cameras, you can change the camera from here. To delete the background, use the Delete Background operator. The lens flares are best treated as a post-processing effect. That's why we have added some new functionalities to enhance the compositing workflow. In this car scene, we have applied multiple lens flares, and the rendering took 1 minute and 52 seconds in cycles. Now, in the extra options, we have introduced a new compositing section. The Setup View Layers operator will exclude the lens flares collection from all the view layers and create a new view layer exclusively for the lens flares. Notably, this version of the add-on will add only one collection and one object, regardless of the number of lens flares, preventing scene clutter. Moreover, it overrides the number of samples to only one, speeding up the rendering process. In the compositor, I will duplicate the render layer and select the lens flares view layer. Then, I'll mix the two layers using the add blending method. A new render in a different slot only took 40 seconds, almost 3 times faster than the previous render, with no discernible visual difference. This is why we recommend using this view layers method whenever possible. Additionally, you can now generate the AOVs for all the lens flares shaders using the Setup AOVs operator, providing you with more control as they are separated. Please note that this functionality currently works only with cycles. To remove the AOVs, use the Remove AOVs operator, and to restore the view layers, use the Remove View Layers operator. Lastly, within the Preferences, in the UI tab, you can modify the add-on's name displayed in the End panel. Additionally, you have the ability to adjust the size of thumbnails and set the number of rows and columns in the presets browser. That wraps up this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or reach out through the support channels. Thanks for watching.